Sean, shall we start? We have got around 25 people already. So,
Yeah, thank you for attending the GSDA webinar today. We're now going live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's global webcast. My name is Gary Joseph. I'm the CEO of the South African Supplier Diversity Council. It's my pleasure on behalf of the Global Supplier Diversity Alliance to welcome all of our participants and our speakers to our second webcast in the second of our three-part GSDA webinar series. For those of you who have joined us for our Corporate Insights webinar 2 weeks ago, I'm sure you'll agree it was very insightful, and there was interesting discussion that took place during the course of the webcast. And I know that tonight's webcast will be just as engaging. Today we hear from our minority business owners on how they have tackled their business trials and tribulations with the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, we all know it's far from over as we see countries around the world experience spikes and second waves of the infection to varying degrees. I acknowledge that we have guests joining us from all around the world. So depending on your location, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'd like to also use this opportunity just to share a bit more about the Global Supplier Diversity Alliance. So Sean, if you could put up the next slide. Okay, the Global Supplier Diversity Alliance. Our main aim and purpose is to create a platform where we can expose our underrepresented minority business owners to mainstream supply chain opportunities, and in so doing help create thousands of jobs in some of the most deprived regions of our countries and in the world. And we ultimately play a major role in building sustainable communities by enabling these businesses to be more successful and to grow over time. And we do this by driving the inclusion of minority business owners within corporate supply chains across the world. Secondly, by providing our corporations that have global supply chain strategies with a single point of access for up-to-date research, in-country business intelligence, and best practices around supply diversity. Thirdly, we give minority businesses access to the information that they need, the networks and the business intelligence that they can tap into in order to trade globally. And fourthly, we bring together advocacy networks from around the world that champion and drive supply diversity and inclusive in procurement. We can move on to the next slide. We are registered as a non-profit company limited by guarantee. This registration took place in the UK. The founding directors of the GSDA as an organization are the presidents and CEOs of MSD UK, Mr. Mayank Shah, from CAMC in Canada, Cassandra Dorrington, Laura Berry as the CEO of Supply Nation in Australia, and myself as the CEO of the SASDC. Like our councils in the different countries in which we operate, key to the strategic direction and the activities that we undertake is the involvement of corporations. And we have an advisory group made up of an esteemed group of people that drive global supply chain strategies for their respective organizations. Joining me on the line today is one of them, Teresa Harrison from EY, Mr. Rondo Vincent from Bristol Myers Squibb, From Accenture, we have Nidra Dixon. From GSK, William Holmes. From Cummins, Helena Hutton. And from Merck, or MSD, as it's known in other parts of the world, Raul Suarez Rodriguez. And from IBM, Andrea Firmian. And Andrea would also be part of today's proceedings, doing the vote of thanks at the end. If we can move to the next slide. GSDA really involves 3 pillars of activity. The pillars of activity is in the area of knowledge, network, and advocacy. From a knowledge perspective, we look at we have a web-based platform through which we want to promote and share information. These include white papers, impact reports, what's of good use for our MBEs and our corporate members within our networks, our country fact files, to understand local dynamics and the local marketplace, case studies, newsletters through which we share information, and of course things over and above blogs and policy and legislation that can be accessed in countries and specific to the different regions in which we operate, or informative webinars such as today's. From a networking perspective, it's about connecting our MBEs globally through events, through business delegations that can attend the different conferences throughout the world that we host as a collective. The participation at the annual global event in the US at the NMSDC conference, and then the facilitation of one-to-one introductions. These MBEs, we want to, over time, build up a database of MBEs that are able to transact and do business globally. And through this network, networking activities, we also want to promote economic outlooks, briefing sessions for more informed decisions. From an advocacy perspective, we'll share policy papers. We do speaking at international forums and conferences to promote supply diversity as a global philosophy and a means of driving more inclusive procurement through our research that we would do, and global expansion in general. Partnering with other advocacy organizations is a key element of the collaboration that we aim to put in place. Next slide. Okay, so with today's webinar, webcast, I will be joined by Teresa Harrison. And with much further ado, I'd like to hand over to my co-host, Teresa Harrison, who is the Director for Inclusive and Sustainable Procurement and Business Enablement at EY. Teresa, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Gary, so much. Thank you. Good day, everyone. And there's no doubt that the last 4 months have been incredibly tough, no matter where you work or live. And so businesses, whether small or large, have been impacted by an unprecedented situation, COVID-19. However, this has provided an opportunity for minority businesses to rethink, to revive, and reset their businesses to survive this pandemic. So today from the webcast, we'll hear from some resilient and innovative minority businesses, owners from Australia, Canada, South Africa, the UK, and US, on how they have navigated the pandemic. We will learn how these entrepreneurs have had to adjust their strategy to recovery and how their customers have supported them. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We'd like to keep this webcast as interactive as possible. If you would like to ask a question, please put the questions in the Q&A box on your screen, and we will try to get to as many as we can during the conversation. If you have any comments for the broader audience, please use the chat bar, the chat function. Importantly, to achieve the best sound quality for all, please keep your microphones on mute. Today's session will be recorded and available on the GSDA website at the end of the series. I would now like to hand it over to our moderator for today, Mr. David J. Ward, Principal from Vantage Partners UK. David has a deep expertise in international leadership, team management, and dynamic changing business environment. Having led teams for major organizations such as GSK, Merck, and Siemens across multiple geographies, including Europe, emerging markets, and Asia Pacific. Amongst his many accolades and positions, David, a former chairman of MSD UK, continues to be a strong advocate for diversity and inclusion. He is based in the UK. David, I'll turn it over to you to hear from this esteemed panel. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Teresa. Thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you, Gary, for your opening words as well. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Wonderful that we have a global audience today as we're talking about things that are truly global in nature, and really important that we can all start to think about how we address some of these challenges as we live in these difficult times. So as Teresa mentioned, COVID-19 has raised the profile of some of the challenges that we're all working with to an extreme degree. Whether you're an entrepreneur running a business, whether you're somebody within a large business, whether you're a supplier to a large business, you've undoubtedly been challenged by the environment that we're now facing. Also, it's interesting to note that whilst COVID itself presents some huge challenges, and I'm sure we're going to talk and learn more about some of those as we go through today's proceedings, we'd be remiss if we didn't notice that in parallel, we've also seen significant movements around calls for greater social justice. Obviously, the Black Lives Matter movement and some of the obscene behaviors that we've seen from authorities around the world in regards to equality and social justice. So what we're seeing from that is much more of a call for action. If indeed we needed one, we certainly have one now. And in previous webinars that we've been running over the last few weeks, we've heard more and more from attendees and from panelists that actually this is really about action and should not be about just more rhetoric and more box ticking. So we want to make sure that our discussions today really do focus on some of those challenges, and critically, what do we do about them and how do we turn them into opportunities? And when we think about opportunities, we've got to think about opportunities for those who've been excluded historically, for big organizations or small organizations, for societies that we work in and represent, as well as for those people who come to work for us and our employees, and the debt that we owe them to behave correctly, to behave in the right way, and to make sure that we really truly open up inclusive activities for everybody. So if we needed a burning platform, we certainly have one. If we needed an excuse or a reason to do something more than we've done in the past, we certainly have one. And again, I hope today that we're going to hear quite a lot of that continued call for action and some interesting points of view from our panelists today. As Teresa says, in my career, I've worked for some big organizations, so I truly recognize what some of the challenges are for big organizations in trying to be agile, in trying to adapt, trying to change sometimes decades-long working practices to accommodate differences and cultural nuances. I'm hoping that those organizations who are here today are listening and are engaged in a lot of change behavior right now, as I'm sure and hope that they have been over the last number of years. And as we look forward, what we want to continue to see is that drive for change throughout our organizations, throughout our societies. And hopefully this is really important. And as Teresa reminds me quite well on the chat, that this is a movement, not a moment. So it is time to move forward, but we need to move forward to points of action. Okay, so I'm going to facilitate today. I'm going to try and help the panelists, and we're going to navigate a series of questions, again, with a background context of the challenges raised by COVID-19, and hopefully some of the opportunities also presented by this significant impact on society. What we're also, though, I'm sure going to get into are some of these other challenges that we face around how we drive for more inclusion, how we remove exclusivity, and how we bring a much greater degree of justice and social mobility to everybody and everybody that we work with. Great panel of speakers representing some real thought leadership across the diversity movement around the world. So we've got a truly global panel. It's a pleasure to be working with you all and to be with you on this call today. I'm going to ask each one to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves and their organizations. If I could start with Farida, if you're there, Farida Gibbs, could you talk a little bit about yourself and your company, please, Farida?
Hi, good morning. Make sure I'm not on mute yet.
We can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Farida Gibbs. I'm the CEO and founder of Gibbs Hybrid. I set up the company back in 2005 when I felt that there was a lack of women in the financial services sector providing services. And throughout that sort of the 15 years, we've evolved to become an international people-powered business where we offer what I call a one-stop shop. So it's all about convenience and how our customers buy their services. So we help our customers with managed project solutions. So those are deliverables, outputs, fixed price work, getting them to a desired outcome. We also, if the customer isn't necessarily interested in the projects, then we can supply them with the talent, or they can simply just outsource those solutions to us. So over the 15 years, we've grown quite a bit into mid-market and global businesses, and our operations now span across the UK, into Europe and the US, where we're able to service over 20 countries in Europe. We've been working with our clients now for 15 years, and we've been recognised as more of a consulting and IT business firm offering hybrid solutions, and more so now than ever what we call hybrid working. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit later.
Sure. Wonderful. Farida. Thank you very much, Farida. And we will talk about some more about that hybrid concept later, I'm sure. Thank you very much. Could I ask Trevor to introduce himself? Trevor Govender, please.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon, good evening, David, to the fellow panelists and everyone that's listening. Thank you to the GSDA for having me. My name is Trevor Govender. I'm the Managing Director of a company called Swift Worldwide Logistics. Swift is a South African freight forwarder. We're headquartered here in the port city of Durban on the east coast of South Africa. We're a minority family-owned business that was formed in 1985. And now the space that we service is international freight forwarding by air and sea, and customs brokerage, warehousing, and local regional transport by road. So we're a medium-sized freight forwarder. We're operating in obviously a highly competitive space with a large number of global forwarders being present in the South African market. And obviously to be competitive in that space, we're part of global partner networks that gives us the ability to freight forward around the world. Our client base sits largely with corporate South Africa, so we're involved in the petrochemical sector, so oil and gas business, mining, and then manufacturing. We're involved with cement, packaging, but largely we're a general freight forwarder. We pretty much handle just about anything. Secondly, I'm also a board member of the South African Supply Diversity Council. I've been involved with their activities for a number of years now. I serve as a chair for 2 of their committees as well. And I suppose last but definitely not least, I'm a husband, father of 3 young kids who keep me really busy. And I'm trying to do the best I can to navigate myself and my family through this new world that we find ourselves in. Yeah, wonderful. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. And I think that resonates with all of us as we all juggle with this new world, and not least with those of us online who are worried that our children are about to run into the office at any moment whilst we're conducting important international conversations. Thank you. Guys, I promised everybody a truly global panel, so we'll leave South Africa for a minute and go over to Canada. Could I ask Manasseh to introduce himself, please?
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Jean-Manassé Théagène. I'm CEO, founder of 360 MedLink, a company I founded in 2010 after spending many years in the pharmaceutical industry working in global marketing. And one of the reasons of creating 360 MedLink is actually to make sure that with technology evolving, that we'll be able to offer a solution to patients and providers to actually better respond to their needs in terms of healthcare. So today we are servicing, some of the leading pharmaceutical companies in the world, and I actually thank them because through this period, I think many of our clients have remained very supportive, from Novartis to Pierre Fabre, Celgene, which now is BMS, Amgen. We started with working with these companies and gradually deliver solutions that even now some US government are using. For us, the mission at 360 MedLink is to provide those digital therapeutics and digital health solutions that provide value to patients. So in a sense, we're looking forward to expanding further. Mainly, our business has been 100% of export between the US and Europe. This last few months have been difficult for every company, but I think for us, we're in a good area, and I'm looking forward to discuss this further with the panel.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Manasseh. I appreciate that. Let's move over now to Australia. Dwayne, if you're with us. Hello, Dwayne. There we go.
Hello, guys. How you going? Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dwayne from Australia. Currently residing in Queensland. I'm not sure if anyone is keeping up to date with Australia's coronavirus, but the state that I usually live in has just gone into lockdown. So it's it's a pretty challenging time for the world with the coronavirus. So I'm the owner and founder of In Travel Group. So we're a corporate travel management company. So the coronavirus has greatly impacted us over these last sort of 4 months, and looking forward to sharing some of views, opinions, and hearing from other people from other countries regarding some of the successes and challenges. Also important to note, I'm on the Indigenous Advisory Board for Supply Nation, Australia's supply diversity champion, if you like, and really looking forward to spending time on this webinar.
Wonderful. Dwayne, thank you very much. And we all saw, I'm sure, the news around the changing scenario in Australia. So thoughts are out with you in terms of your experience of the second wave there and the implications for further lockdown. So thank you for joining today. Could we go to our final panelist, please? Reshma. Reshma, if you're with us, joining from the US.
There we go.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Reshma Murthy with Frontier Technologies. I'm president and CEO, and I joined Frontier in 2007, and I pretty much worked from there up the ranks. I'm a second generation business owner as well. So my family started Frontier Technologies about 30 years ago, and we're an IT infrastructure services company focusing a lot on cybersecurity. I'm really excited to be here today to, again, hear from all the other panelists and the attendees on the call today, and also to share my insight and my experience on what we're doing and how Frontier Technologies has responded to the COVID situation from a US perspective, and also how we had to adjust from an international perspective. So excited to be here today and talk more. Thanks.
Wonderful. Reshma, thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, there are panelists, as you can see, a very diverse range of people in a very diverse range of industries across very geographically diverse locations. So hopefully we're going to get some really interesting perspectives. I'm sure we'll see a lot of similarities, and I'm sure we'll see a lot of differences. So looking forward to the discussion. If we can now move into the first part of our session, really to think about the impact of the COVID crisis and how we've had to adjust to accommodate the significant challenges this has posed to our different businesses. Reshma, maybe I could stay with you as a starting point, if you don't mind. I know it's always a bit challenging to be first up. But if I could stay with you and ask you about, talk to us a little bit about how your business has had to make some adjustments, particularly around strategy and revenue generation.
So, about every 2 quarters, before the end of the year, we always have a really good plan. And, in 2019, we spent a good time really trying to plan out our revenue goals and our team goals. And then clearly in 2020, it started out really well. And then it just kind of, it just evaporated just because of the current situation. And so how we had to really adjust is we had to really take the time to focus on our company internally. And that's how I approached it. So I looked at the overall culture of the company. Is it the direction that I want it to be? We looked at marketing from a US perspective, but also from an international perspective. Are we positioning ourselves properly? And then in addition, are we truly understanding what our clients are needing at this time, right? When it comes to different cybersecurity needs, how do we present ourselves to our clients to show that we are still there, we are still thinking about, we're still thinking, we're still strategizing? Are we coming up with different opportunities that can still help our clients, even though we're in a remote world as of right now? And that's been, I'm trying to think, there was something else I wanted to say. And then again, also ensuring that do we have the right team? And then when I look at that, my current team, evaluating my current team, the people that I have in place now, are they in the right position? Should I potentially move them in different areas now, knowing what is happening? And that's been really important for us, just to take a good look at how we can adapt and still show strength to our clients.
Wonderful. So it's interesting that you're talking about adaptation and agility. I think one of the things that we've seen so much with diverse organizations is that ability to face crisis and think about how they adapt, which is often harder for some of the bigger, more established organizations to do. But it's not just structural, it's a mindset change as well that's very apparent. Thanks, Reshma. If I could perhaps go to Farida. Farida, maybe similar question for you and your organization in the UK. What have been some of the ways you've had to adapt from a strategy and revenue generation perspective?
Good question. So I think when COVID hit us, it was almost as if it was another bit of a knock, because we were already dealing with Brexit, the dreaded B word that everyone hates.
We've done well there. That's 20 minutes without saying Brexit. Well done.
But that's reality, right?
Yes.
So we were trying to sort of adjust with that, because we are in Europe. How is it going to impact the business? How is it going to affect our customers? How do we operate? How do we hire? And then we had this other new bit of legislation that came in, which is the IR35 piece in the UK. So it's a bit like the 1099s moving to W2s in the States. So we're dealing with that. And then suddenly, bang, comes along COVID. So you've suddenly got a workforce who are absolutely in the thick of it, rolling their sleeves up, trying to get the job done. And then suddenly, you kind of sat there with them saying, we're about to head into a major crisis here. No one could have predicted, even with a crystal ball, that this was going to happen. So for us, the strategy has been communicating and constantly communicating with our employees, keeping them informed, not making sure they're not in the dark, letting them know what the impact is. Constantly speaking to our customers and our clients, just making sure, how is it going to impact them? Because whatever impacts them impacts us, because it goes down. And then just being mindful that even though we're in a COVID situation and it's very likely that business is going to pause for a little bit, there's still business to be maintained. And that was the focus for us. So it was not worrying about, we're going to go out of business. It was about, how do we preserve what we have right now? How do we manage and maintain the projects and the programs and the expectations that our customers have in a very, very difficult and uncertain time? So a lot of that for us, new business wasn't coming in because obviously it's on pause. We've still got to take care of. And it's saying how do we manage and maintain. So what we found is our sales teams and our front office teams were perhaps not as busy as we would like them to by bringing in new work and new projects, but we found that our back office function, our middle office function, our support services function still had to maintain. So our strategy was all around preserving and maintaining the business that we have today.
That's really interesting that you observe that shift from front to back office, as we might traditionally call those things, and you're then for having to leverage the strengths of a different part of your organization whilst one part is perhaps slightly unable to do what they'd normally be doing. I also like the idea about, or just the mention of the fact that this is unprecedented, and what it says to me is no one could have predicted we'd be in this situation, and what that says is no matter how much businesses talk about long-term modeling, you've always got to build in that flexibility and that agility that you're going to be hit by things that you simply can't predict. And that speaks to then an ability to be agile and to be flexible. Thanks, Farida. Trevor, South Africa, the freight business. Talk to us a little bit about how that has looked as you've gone through the COVID crisis. And again, you know, in terms of business strategy, what have been some of the things you've had to adjust or change?
Yeah, so obviously the space that we're in has been extremely challenging. Once borders closed, it became difficult to move equipment into the country and out of the country. I mean, I think if I had to speak firstly on the strategy aspects, I mean, it just, one of the things that I can say about that is that all your best laid plans basically go out the window, and it becomes a preservation exercise. It's about getting into gear quickly. And I think once you're in the midst of it, it's largely about implementing your disaster management plans and making sure that it's business as usual. For us, I think we had done well in the years leading up to this to kind of automate our business and have the ability to work basically remotely. And this was one of the ultimate tests of that. And in terms of our business, it's worked well. In terms of strategies going forward, I mean, really where we are right now, we're still very much in the start of this thing. So it's difficult to know what the landscape's going to be like in the future. I think it's a case of adapting to the situation. But yeah, the freight industry, it has been a little bit vibrant because obviously we still are largely an import-based country. So there are still a lot of imports coming into the country. Challenging because of the lack of freight space that's available at the moment. Obviously, as the airlines stopped coming in and a lot less of the shipping operators calling South African ports, it's become more challenging to get space coming into the country and more expensive for our clients as well. So challenging times, but interesting and exciting. And I'm also satisfied that our business has shown a fair amount of resilience through the first phase of this. But I mean, I think all of us are still very much at the start of it.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. And I've had clients who've talked about return to work strategies, although accepting at the same time that return to work seems a long way away and we will be in a new normal. I don't think anyone's expecting that the world will return to some kind of post-COVID existence. It will be some kind of new normal. And that's going to be one of the big challenges, which we'll perhaps get to later on. Thanks for that, Trevor. Manasseh, if I could ask you over in Canada, hopefully you're still with us. Again, you mentioned earlier your business being in the technology side of healthcare. What does that look like from a strategy perspective, and how have you managed to continue to think about building strategy going forward and protecting revenue and generating revenue?
Yes, I think a lot of comments from the other panelists I fully agree with. For us, in terms of strategy, we're trying to apply the short-term one and then the longer term. So how do we survive through COVID, and then what happens beyond COVID?
Yep.
One of the things that I knew clearly is that the pharma industry spends a lot of money for conventions and many of those events, and therefore much of this budget then would have to be restructured somehow.
Yep.
So we were thinking, okay, beyond that, we're probably going to have more demand for the virtual aspect. And I was already by January following what was happening in China, and so many of the telehealth companies stocks were booming up. So we knew there was going to be something happening there. So for us, in terms of strategy, the first thing is to focus on the employees, because without my team, not much can happen. And I think it's the same for many companies. So to make sure that they were okay, their families were okay, and then the next is the clients, because if I have my team, then I can take care of my clients. Everything else then follows suit. So
Yeah.
once we're able to do those two things, then we start looking at the financials and how do we reduce costs and how do we optimize operations. Clearly, with 100% export, we're traveling a lot, and with the ban for travel, we're unable now to make this happen. Trying to get new business from new clients didn't make much sense either. So it's really helping those that are currently our clients to service them to the best possibility and hope that they stay with us, and that's pretty much what happens. We're talking about strategy and all that. For me, the team again is essential. We're in an industry that is healthcare and technology, so a lot of smart people that I'm surrounded with. And when I interview candidates, one of the questions I tend to ask them is also how do they deal with adversity? Because we're all smart people, we can establish a plan, but when the unpredictable happens, how do you deal with it? And typically This is where I see a difference, and that's how when crises like this happen, I think we're able to go through it. Obviously, it's not completely finished yet, but I think we're in a good mode now, and we see that with telehealth and everything going in terms of remote healthcare, now just took 4 or 5 years of advance versus what was planned past.
Wonderful. I'd like to come back to some of those thoughts around how you're seeing the opportunities going forward, as well as just dealing with the current challenge, if I may. So we'll come back to those. Dwayne, could I jump over to you in Australia? Feels like the travel industry out of all of them has probably been impacted the most. Tell us about how it's been for you and what strategies look like over the last couple of months and what it might look like going forward.
Yeah, look, I must admit it was a bit of a shock to the system. It was the travel industry was one of the first industries to be impacted. People just weren't getting on planes, and we're a corporate travel agency, so we look after companies' travel needs, so flights, accommodation, vehicle hire, transportation. So when COVID hit, and when it really hit, we saw a 100% drop in sales. We maintained that 100% for around about 2 months. So it was quite honestly a shock. Like we were, I was at that point thinking, this business is going to close down. So to be honest, I don't want to sound negative, because it's a very different situation now. But at that time, it did challenge my thoughts on opening a travel company. So strategically, it's a different picture now. So our government kicked in and they did support a lot of businesses, and so it became a little bit more certain our future. So strategically, look, immediately when we had such a dramatic decrease in sales, it was really about managing those costs. And unfortunately, my highest costs were people. So a lot of people stood down and made redundant. I've only managed to keep 30% of those people on, so it was incredibly sad to lose 70%. But it was a necessity, and we're really simply in survival mode. And then coming out of that survival mode, we have seen a slight upturn. I'm probably going to say 10% in sales, which is a good sign. Yeah. And so now we're also utilizing the downtime because it's incredibly quiet. We've reset our mindset on the future and feeling very positive about the future. And we're spending this time wisely on innovation, new technology, new solutions, new marketing, new strategy, essentially, that will get us ready for the upturn. We're a smaller player in the travel industry, and what we are seeing is that travel policies or travel programs for corporate for corporate travel programs, they have dramatically decreased and will decrease over the next sort of couple of years, and therefore we believe that expands our target market, believe it or not. So from what was a fairly doom and gloom outlook for me, it's now turned into something more optimistic than I've ever thought. So,
okay, thank you for that. And it sounds like some of your messages on innovation sort of underline the phrase that necessity is the mother of invention. So, you know, out of crisis, we often see some of the best innovative ideas materializing. It sounds like you've had to step into that space, despite the fact you've obviously had some very, very challenging decisions to make about employees.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much for that. I want to jump back to Farida, if I can, Farida, and ask you about customer relationships. So as you've faced the crisis and managed yourself through the crisis, have you got a couple of good examples of maybe how strong customer relationship management has helped? Or conversely, have you found customers, you know, running to the hills? What's that look like for you?
Yeah, so I would say for the first sort of 6 to 8 weeks, it was very quiet. We were keeping in touch with all of our customers, first of all, checking in to make sure that they were okay, and then letting them know that we were here when they were ready. And I think into sort of week 9, we started to notice quite a few of our customers approaching us, wanting sort of our view on COVID, what was our perspective of the new world. So we started to see a number, and there was a commonality in the ask across the customer base, which was things like projects around cloud computing. You know, how can we, you know, everyone's looking for BCP and business continuity planning. You know, we started to see requests for our change teams, because obviously there was going to be a considerable amount of change going into a lot of companies, and change around remote working. Remote solutions, a big one. We work with Cisco, so there was a huge uptake in, okay, we need to perhaps look at our sort of remote working solutions. We're not sure if people are going to be going back to the office like they used to. I mean, we opened our offices like 4 or 5 weeks ago, had sanitizations, and have let it, we've opened it to our teams to say, you're welcome to go back. And we've had a very little uptake because people genuinely actually feel happier working from home. So, so going back to sort of your questions around the customers, it became more of an advisory relationship. What was our thoughts? How could we help? You know, we can't use our facilities at work. Can we come and use your facilities? So it's really a partnership approach for us, and more than anything, what we've noticed is our clients are leaning on us more now than ever, because we were available to speak to. The agility, we were there 24/7. They would drop a note to the much bigger, larger, more established corporations, and they didn't hear anything. So that ability to sort of home in and be there really shone for our customers, because they really realized that smaller firms are more responsive, a lot more agile, more nimble, through things quicker with them. We get answers, we get the answers to our questions a lot quicker. So from that has really put us in a really good position now, because actually that where the customers are thinking, well, hold on, you know, the large corporates weren't there in the first instance, now the smaller ones are. And actually with the whole BLM movement and looking to do the right thing by bringing in more diverse suppliers into the supply chain, that it kind of has gone hand in hand. The whole sort of COVID and BLM movement, I feel, has put suppliers like us in a very good advantage, where we are able to just navigate quicker and be a lot more responsive. And I think it's that responsiveness that is the key right now for many of our clients.
Yeah, I think they're really fascinating points, and particularly, you know, I think the BLM movement, you know, happening or continuing through the same period has certainly been an interesting dynamic. I also see you talk about being a trusted advisor or becoming a trusted advisor to your customers in this space. And as we all know, some of the best sales strategies are based on the fact that if you can get into that space and you can use this as the opportunity to become that trusted advisor, that's tremendous strength going forward, hopefully. Thank you for that, Frida. Trevor, in South Africa, the air freight business you told us about a little bit earlier, how have your customers helped you, or have you got good examples of where you managed to maintain strong relationships?
Yeah, so obviously once we went into the hard lockdown, we never really had a lot of time, like most parts of the world, to prepare. And similarly with our clients as well, they were forced into a position where a lot of them had cargo on the water or freight arriving at airports, and they were stuck in the sense that they couldn't accept cargo. So we had to obviously come up with solutions for them, and I think they appreciate that we had the ability to support them at that time in being able to get stuff customs cleared and move through the ports and into warehouses and into storage, so that they weren't building up these huge storage costs. So it was just our ability to support them at pretty much their greatest time of need. I mean, I think you always have these business continuity plans, and this was one of the great tests of how well businesses are able to function through periods like this. So yeah, in terms of our customer base, it was just important to be able to support them at that time. And then beyond that, I mean, I think it was just us letting them know that we're available. Although the business environment is changing, it doesn't necessarily mean that our service level to them and our standard of service to them is going to change in any way. We're still able to do what we do. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I worked a little bit in my career at DHL, if that's not three challenging letters for you. I'd suggest they probably struggled to be as agile as you, but did you find opportunity where you wouldn't have found it before, do you think?
Yeah, it's been an interesting time in South Africa. I mean, obviously, freight forwarding, traditionally, when it comes to getting business in South Africa, it's a relationship game. It's you've got to get out there and meet people and form relationships, and then obviously that leads into a tender process, and hopefully beyond that something good comes. So breaking into corporate South Africa is not always easy, but interestingly, over this period, I think a lot of corporates have been more open to finding an alternative supply base. I'm not sure if it's possibly because they've struggled with their existing supply base, but yeah, for us, it's created some opportunities to engage with some new companies that we haven't spoken to before.
Wonderful. Thanks, Trevor. I'm going to ask Manas to pick up. We're going to move now and think about the concept of pivoting for success. So it's been great to hear some of the challenges and some of the things you've done to deal with the challenges. Let's think a little bit more about future planning and what the future looks like for your organizations, particularly around strategies for recovery or for continued growth, depending on how you look at that. And perhaps some thoughts, Manas, about how do you think your customers view diverse suppliers going forward, given some of the experiences of working with organizations like yours through the first part of the crisis?
I mean, how do I see them view it? It's not obvious because that's their own, I would say, position. But the way I anticipate that they would react is that it is clear that we're all interlinked. I mean, I spent years in the corporate world, so I know very often when decisions are being made. And also there's a compliance aspect where you're selecting a vendor, then you need to go through certain steps. Very often also there's always some preferences that are established. And also big companies, again, particularly pharma and others, tend to rely on the big corporations because there are certain standards that they have to respect. I think things are about to change a little bit now because, again, we can clearly see how we are all interlinked. We can also see that it's not because, a company is small means that it cannot deliver. In healthcare, in particular technology, agility, it's a key thing. Yeah. And most of these companies are now open for innovation. So they're working with startups and all these things because they realize in the end, creativity comes from the agility in small teams and not the big, I would say, big corporations that sometimes are a little bit slow to react. So how this impact our strategy? How do we adapt to it? And how do we see ourselves in the future or the industry going in the future? We know, again, the remote management of patients is critical now. We also know that coming up with new adaptations that fits the technologies or the demands of patients and providers is also important. So one of the things we did is to accelerate some of the features that we're building in some of our applications. For instance, the virtual coach platform Tavi, to integrate more of the telehealth as part in it. Another aspect of the business that we've been doing is also for clinical trials. So we know through COVID, there was a lot of stops of the clinical trials, and likely by the end of the summer, things will pop up, in a faster mode. So we've been preparing for those with, the features that we know that are gonna resonate well with our clients, and obviously to gain, future clients as now there are more discussions going on. Recently, we also signed an agreement with one of the I would say, largest pharma companies in terms of being able to share a very large database of content, educational content that they have for patients. And I think these are the type of things that's going to really help our business. And obviously, and I think, is it Farida who mentioned, being a close advisor to the clients, I think is one of the key aspects. We're exchanging a lot with them for the last few months, actually before that too, but I mean more intense for the last few months. And with this exchange, we're better understanding, what are the positions that they're gradually taking in terms of where they want to focus, how they want to use their budget, and how their business is being impacted. Because a lot of providers now, physicians, are doing a lot of remote care, remote diagnostic, and so on.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Would love to catch up on some of these things later as well. I think there's some really important points you make there, particularly around the healthcare industry, but also about the role of technology. I want to jump to Dwayne though. Dwayne, in your role as advocate in Australia around diversity, do you have a view around what the environment looks like now as we go through the COVID landscape, and maybe thinking post-COVID landscape in terms of attitudes towards supplier diversity, in terms of perhaps hopefully greater engagement with a broader range of diverse suppliers for some of the big organizations that you might interact with?
Yeah, look, it's been an interesting period. I mean, I think like many countries, that the large corporates, the bigger buyers, they're also in a state of shock as well, and they're trying to gather their senses to think about their future. So I think a lot of supply diversity initiatives and corporate social responsibility initiatives were perhaps maybe paused. I don't believe they're going to be forgotten about, but I also think that Australia is maybe there are a handful of really good corporates that do some great things around Indigenous affairs, but I think that Australia in general was, corporate Australia was needing to improve anyway. So I think COVID is going to really just put a pause on the supply diversity initiatives, and I really hope that we can kick it back off. I do speak to people who are still in the fight to do what they can with supply chain initiatives and support Indigenous communities in Australia. But I do also see a lot of people just focusing on their own businesses at the moment. And so I honestly think we've got a few more months to go before we see really where supply diversity is really at in Australia.
Okay. And can I just build on that question and perhaps ask, one of the things the COVID crisis has forced into organizations is to rethink extended long supply chains. So to rethink, geographically diverse supply chains, for example, and relook at the complexity of those supply chains. From your perspective, do you think there's the opportunity there for a lot more local sourcing in Australia, for example, and would that be a catalyst to greater diversity and inclusion in supply strategies?
So there's two parts to this. I think so. I do think Australia. I think the big companies will look local for supply chain. I think they will. They might deglobalize, or they might sort of look towards local businesses to support our Australian economy, like I think other countries will do. They'll try and support local economies. I think that's just what we will do as a society. The second part to this is the Indigenous business sector. We're made up of a lot of small to medium-sized enterprises. We're an emerging sector. So a lot of new businesses, a lot of young companies, so small companies. So I think that does essentially put us in the fray, in the framework for procurement opportunities. I think we'll see opportunities, but to my previous point, I still think that the attitudes of some companies in Australia, they're going to have to shift towards making more risks. And if they don't have a risk appetite, then some of these small Indigenous businesses are still going to miss out like we've missed out for many years. So the main fundamental change that's still required pre-COVID, post-COVID, is the appetite for risk for large companies.
Thanks there, Dwayne. And I think you've touched on an important point in terms of risk appetite. And one of the elephants in the room often is that whether they believe it or not, they perceive that with smaller organizations, be they diverse or otherwise, they see a higher degree of risk. One of the things we might hope through the COVID crisis, that as we've heard from some of our panelists who've been able to step up to meet some of the challenges, is that actually some of the big corporations will realize that actually some of that risk is unfounded and it is perception, not reality. It would be nice to think that there is some proof in that through this crisis. Could I jump over to Reshma, please, in the States? Reshma, if you're still with us, in your world, particularly thinking about cyber, I guess, and cybersecurity, an area that I've worked on myself for a while is, there's a lot of bad actors out there, right, who've probably been seeking to look for opportunity to infiltrate and disrupt more during these times of crisis. Is that something your business has seen? And do you see that same risk appetite from your customers when they think about engaging you to help with those types of challenges? Or have you been able to, do you think, leverage the opportunity better than that?
So I think it's a very interesting time right now, David. When we're approaching our clients in this world, whether pre-COVID or post, pre-COVID and now COVID, we've had to take a different approach to our sales process. And I think what's important is when we're talking to our clients, we are now coming to them and approaching them with the different areas of cybersecurity that's going to be relevant to them. And so that's how we've had to take in that approach. We go there and we discuss, okay, here's your current situation. Here are all your assets, IoT assets, buildings, all the different areas of risk. And then we walk them through, okay, these are the areas, and this is where we think these ABC technologies can help them solve those problems. And it's actually been very well received. And I've seen it very well received on the federal side, because we're a big federal supplier as well in the US. And also we're supporting, the different agencies across the globe as too. And also from the commercial side as well. So on the enterprise side, talking with different manufacturing companies, gas and oil, it's been a very big need. So I think it's just how you approach the conversation and how you're trying to sell to them is what I've noticed is big. And that's how it's differentiating us as a supplier and demonstrating that value to the client.
And building on Dwayne's comments about risk appetite within perhaps the bigger organizations, is that something you've seen become easier or more challenging, do you think?
During COVID, right?
Yeah.
I've seen it actually, it's been the same. So I've worked very hard over the, past 15 years of being part of the company and really part of actively involved in the supplier diversity world nationally and internationally and developing those relationships. And so during this time, I actually had to force those contacts that I've known for many years to really step up and really provide those opportunities, because now no one else, we're not traveling as much and we're all limited in where we're going. And I've actually seen that say maybe out of the 10 people that I reach out to, say 3 of them are actually really engaging with me on conversations and actually taking me to the CISOs and the CEOs and the CIOs of their big organizations because they actually see the value. So for us in our industry, technology, cybersecurity, you need it whether you're working at home or you're still in the office. And data centers are still running, right? I mean, all that's still running. It's just how you have had to shift to service your clients.
Sure, and presumably a lot of cyber risk has actually increased as people log on to home networks which have less security. Farida's put a hand up. Farida, did I see a hand raised there?
Yeah. For me personally, I want to go back to the topic about risk.
Yeah.
And I think you quite rightly said about perception. I think we've got to work on removing that perception that SME diverse businesses are risky.
Yes.
They're not risky. And the only way that you're really going to understand whether a supplier from a diverse background is able to contribute successfully is by putting them through an RFP to make that right judgment call. So companies I know like IBM and BMS, and that there are some others who absolutely have a policy where they have to put in a diverse supplier through every single RFP process. You've got to give people an opportunity to access that opportunity. If you don't give them an opportunity to access it, you're never going to succeed. And so, so personally for me, I've for the last sort of 15 years, it's been a battle because you do have to work with removing that perception and working with procurement. So in organisations, you do have those absolute supply diversity advocates who go around trying to educate procurement and buyers and category buyers to say this absolutely makes sense. But unless those buyers, hand on heart, when they are electing those suppliers to put through an RFP, they will never understand what those diverse suppliers are capable of. Because actually, IBM put us through an RFP, and we were battling with the companies that were in the billion-dollar categories, and actually we came, we were able to prove ourselves, and we were able to really make a difference and bring something fresh. So it's really important that I think I know that there's a lot of people here who have dialed in today who will be sort of who have just as much passion as I, as Dwayne, as Reshma, as the panelists about succeeding. But we've got to find a way to work with those procurement people to say, and procurement buyers to say, we're not risky, give us an opportunity. And if we don't succeed at the end of the day, that's okay. We'll learn from it and we'll come back bigger and stronger.
Sure. Your points are really well made. And as you know, we've facilitated quite a lot of discussion with big organizations and procurement groups, and the challenges are very real and seem sometimes difficult to shift, right? So inclusion in the sourcing process has to be an essential part of giving smaller and diverse suppliers the opportunity. But that shouldn't be tokenism. That should be genuine inclusion to want to learn and find out more about what's available in the supply base. That often contradicts with procurement and corporate goals of a reduced supplier community and only working with companies that they perceive to be less risky because they're financially perhaps bigger or geographically more diverse and more spread out, et cetera, et cetera. So it presents some very real challenges. However, I think your point is absolutely the right one. The other thing that's important is sustainability, right? So winning an RFP or getting involved in one is great, but then what we want to make sure is that becomes sustainable practice within some of the big organizations, not a one-off event to say that, hey, we've included some diverse folks today. Wonderful, thank you. Guys, I'm going to move us on to thinking about supplier diversity specifically in the last sort of 10 minutes or so of this panel. And perhaps if we could go over to Trevor again in South Africa. Trevor, there's a danger during a crisis like COVID, I guess, that thoughts about being more inclusive, about engendering diversity, get lost in the other noise and the other challenges that organizations are facing. You mentioned corporate South Africa as a difficult place to deal with. What does that look like as a landscape over the last few months? Do you see signs of hope, or has it been frustration?
It is a challenging space. I mean, I agree with what Dwayne was saying earlier. I think in the current space that we find ourselves in, a lot of companies are looking inwardly first. And obviously the preservation of cash becomes a big thing. And what you don't want to see is supply diversity programs just being viewed as another cost, or one of the first costs or programs that you can cut.
Yeah.
In a time like this. So it is challenging. I mean, South Africa is an extremely challenging space with the history that we have come from and the space that we're going into. You know, there's diverse suppliers in South Africa do have significant challenges breaking into corporate South Africa. And I was just listening to what Farida was saying, and she talks about, you know, that yes, we can be trusted. I mean, and I think minority businesses are resilient, and I think that will be proven to a point as well when all of this is over, because you know, the ones that have survived this are proof that we are resilient. In South Africa, there are challenges, and I think Gary can speak a little bit, will share a little about the supply development space, where there are also a lot of suppliers that aren't necessarily skilled to a point where they can deal with corporate South Africa. So there is a fair amount of supply development and enterprise development that needs to take place. And I think that is what causes some hesitation from, in our case, corporate South Africa, in terms of dealing with minority suppliers.
So thinking about the concern that, hey, if I hire a smaller, diverse organization, I've got to invest time and possibly money and efforts to upskill them to be able to meet our requirements. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And yet that is exactly what needs to take place so that you can create a broader landscape of suppliers to utilize. In the context of South Africa in particular, you know, coming from the history that we've come from, it's what needs to take place so that we can have a more inclusive economy.
Yeah, it's part of surely a commitment that corporate should have to society in general, not just to themselves, but to the societies that they service.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where the fear comes in. Obviously, with COVID and companies now scrambling to sort of retain as much as possible their bottom lines, you really don't want to see them cutting back on the supply diversity programs and supply development, enterprise development programs.
Wonderful. Thank you for those thoughts, Trevor. Manas, if we can go to you in Canada, if you're still with us. If you were speaking to a bunch of large corporates, and I have experience of large corporate pharma myself, so I know that there are often some challenges there. What do you think some of the benefits are that diverse supply bases have demonstrated over the last couple of months and perhaps could be sustainable going forward?
I'm not sure I have an answer to this. Well, I mean, the benefits, I have to, again, focus on what I do with our clients, because I don't know all the different other industries. For sure, for us, it's bringing an agile technology that we know that has provided good value for patients or providers, to be able to implement also in a timely fashion, because very often what we see coming from the bigger companies, bigger corporations as suppliers, is also the inability to react quickly. When we look at the pharma side, you know, pricing is often not the big thing for them because they do have a budget. But I think more and more we do see some pressure on the budgets, and people are trying to select what best fits in quality, but in the end also maybe allow them to optimize their budget use. So I do think it's a combination of different things, and also that it varies depending on the companies that we're talking to, because from the big pharma to the biotechs, I think there are different cultures that we tend to see, which also reflects the different regions where they're based between, I would say, European companies and Americans. We've been lucky to work with different levels. So from some of the global teams based in the US and some of the European operations. So we have different, aspect of support or interaction with them.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your thoughts there, and recognize that you're focused around big pharma. Do you think if you could give them any messages right now, what do you think a couple of messages would be to those big pharmas that you would like to work with?
I think the panel you have here today, we're all people who have been in this business for a little while, who have had good success in terms of implementing, projects. A little bit about risk. I don't see that much risk, because if we've been able to service other big companies, where is the risk? So therefore, I think it should be easy to increase the ability for companies like ours to participate to RFPs and to participate into just getting more business. Because in the big scheme of things, when we look at risk, a lot of big companies have been going bankrupt in the last few months, because the bigger they are, obviously the bigger their cost of operations. And in the end, if you're not supporting some of those small vendors, when business goes back to to its normal fast activity, you may have less ability to have the support you need to support your bigger business. I mean, if we look at the airline industry right now, I think there's a big dilemma for them, because currently it's very difficult to stay afloat. But at the same time, if you let go some of those supporting businesses that are behind them, when they really kickstart again, it's going to be difficult to have the proper quality and capacity to fulfill the demand. So my message, to the big pharma and smaller pharmas, because we do see again a good uptick coming from biotechs. And I didn't mention this much, but we also work with the U.S. government, the state of Rhode Island, and now discussing with other states. So it's very simple. It's to give the opportunity and test, and also look at the track record. I think that can predict the ability for a company to really provide the services. And maybe lastly, in terms of again talking about risk or reducing risk, most of us are often supported by government institutions. Where the moment we have a contract signed, that contract can be guaranteed and can be secured, and the financials easily follow. So the aspect of risk is not so much the reality. Sometimes how you want to how interested you are in terms of supporting businesses.
Yeah, absolutely right. Thank you for those thoughts, Dwayne. If I could go over to you in Australia. Again, if you think about perhaps engagement with Indigenous communities and some of the challenges that are clearly there, what's the messaging to corporate Australia, do you think, right now, as we are probably only mid-crisis with still quite a long road ahead?
And I think for everyone listening, if you're not aware, that there are huge gaps between Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians around multiple facets: health, employment, wealth, etc. So those challenges are very real, and they're still very serious as of today. And COVID did not do our Indigenous communities any favours. So it did not change things in a positive manner. It did not. No good luck came out of it for Indigenous communities. In fact, I think it's probably going to challenge us even further. So we've always had a lot of work to do. Now we still need to get back on the bandwagon. So corporate Australia needs to get behind their corporate social responsibility strategy and initiatives, and still really don't forget the good work that they can achieve if they support Indigenous businesses. So it's one of the sure ways to help our to solve some of our issues in Indigenous Australia. Supply chain initiatives will absolutely help. So I just urge corporate Australia to keep going. Don't forget about us. And when you can, let's get back on the bandwagon.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dwayne. Reshma, if you're still with us in the States, some thoughts from you. Again, you're in the technology sector, but if you could talk to some of your bigger corporate target clients, what sort of messaging would you be giving right now about the value of diverse organizations during times of crisis?
I think that's a good question. And I think it would just be that diverse suppliers are adaptable, and we can are adaptable. And I think that's really important, that they believe in that and they trust it. And I think that also echoes what Farida was mentioning earlier and everybody else was saying, in the sense of, you know, we have to somehow get out of being kind of boxed into this specific group.
Yeah.
And also, as diverse suppliers, we have that responsibility to actually really step up and demonstrate those capabilities. I mean, and it goes both ways, because corporates also have to be open and they have to change their perspective too. So I think if both parties can change their perspectives, then the true colors and capabilities of both companies can be can shine through. And so I think that would be my message, is to open it up a little bit more, but then also diverse suppliers need to step up and show up when it's time.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Strong messages. I'm going to stay with you, if I can, Reshma, for perhaps the last round of questions for the panel. And so you'll probably be quite pleased I've chosen you first, because by the time I get to number 5, I suspect everyone will have said something. But you've got a lot of entrepreneurs on the line. You've got a lot of people who are, you know, building businesses, developing businesses, struggling with the challenges. A couple of final comments from you about, you know, things you could say to them as words of encouragement as we navigate these challenging times.
Definitely. I mean, as we all have discussed, that, you know, it's been a very, very weird time, and it's definitely affected me personally, but also a little bit professionally, because my world went from being busy every single day to and traveling to all of a sudden just being confined in one spot. But I think what's important is that, you know, you take the time to actually really refocus on yourself, you know, get the energy, do what you have to do to self-help, and then that's going to make you a better business leader for your team. And that's what I have done. And then also just really take the time to look at your team, do a business analysis, and figure out, are you on the right path? Things are a little bit slower now. You know, are there other ways for you to organically or inorganically grow? Make those shifts in your company. Figure out, are there new avenues of lines of businesses that you can go after, and that you have the right resources and the team and the partners that make sense for your clients. And that's what we have done. And it's been good, but it's been challenging, and stick with it. And I know I'm over here in the US, and I'm sure a lot of our panelists are across the world, but I'm always here as a resource or a friend, a business friend, if you ever, you know, need to connect.
Thank you for that. I'm sure people will appreciate it. And I think the ideas around introspection and internalizing and using the time to do that are well received. Farida, over to you for some final thoughts to the folks on the line.
Good question. So my final thoughts to everyone on the line would be, don't worry, you're not alone. We're all in it together. And I think, you know, we're not siloed. This is not a 2008 financial crisis where it was a particular sector or an industry. We're all in the same boat, whether you're a corporate, whether you're an SME, whether you're a startup. We're all feeling the pains. And I think if we can just all be a little bit more supportive together, as in, you know, MSD UK has an amazing platform of those businesses. If we can spend time talking to each other as well, and looking out for each other, because it's not always about working just with the corporates. You know, we have a policy where right now our priority is to do any buying of services or products from those within the network. So, you know, I've got to find a way of how can I help someone further down the chain. So I think just stay focused, stay positive, look for an opportunity to diversify if you can, and just take care of yourself, because I think what has impacted and what I have seen is, as to Reshma's point, is that we've all just gone from traveling all over the world, regions, locations, to suddenly just being plonked in one location. Yeah. So well-being is really, really important, and just hope for the best, that positive will come out of it, and I'm sure we'll get through this together.
And I think a great timely reminder about platforms, whether it's MSD UK or others, that allow small and diverse suppliers to interact and to buy and sell and to collaborate with each other and build strength amongst the community from that perspective as well. So it's not just a diverse supplier to corporate conversation, it's about the whole community of diversity as well. Wonderful, thank you, Farida. Trevor, if you're still with us in South Africa, a few words from you to close.
Yeah, I mean, a similar kind of thing to everyone else. I mean, I think it's important to remain positive because just within our own business as well, the people that work with us and for us rely on leadership to be positive at a time like this. It's an extremely difficult time. It's nothing like anything that anybody's been through before. So we're all in the same boat. So I think it's important to be positive, but I think it's also important to be adaptable to the situation that's in front of you, to be able to change with what's happening, to react to what's going on quickly. And I think that is one of the strengths of diverse supplies anyway. And I think it's something that we can use. It's one of the bows in our armor. Yeah, and I still look at the future very positively. I mean, no matter what, I think it's an exciting time. The world is changing. I mean, obviously with the BLM movement that's kicked off again, and I think you know, the world is a very diverse place, and I think it's evolving at such a rapid pace as well. And I think diverse supplies have got a place, and yeah, who knows? Out of all of this, good will come.
Thank you. Positivity there from Trevor. Appreciate that very much. Manas, over to you in Canada. Entrepreneurs listening in, any words or advice for them as they navigate this challenge?
Sure. I think a lot have been said in terms of being positive and resilient. I think for me also is the spirit has allowed to have more reflections, because being in technology and healthcare are very often technology people think, you know, you have to be a unicorn where you raise X billion of dollars, X millions, and then, you know, try to value the company above the $1 billion. In the end, you know, I think we're more of the zebra company. Our philosophy is to do something good, do it well, and then we'll go gradually with time. I think that will deliver in terms of wellness and wealth, because that is the proper mission. I mean, it has to go with your life philosophy and your personality. And for me, this is more where it is now. I think I know well my team, well my company, and we're going to try to continue to do the good thing, and the rest will follow.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And just to close, I'd like to thank the panelists for their time today. Thank you for the insights. Thank you for the thoughts. Hopefully it's been engaging and useful for everybody on the line who's been listening. Hopefully we've tackled some of the things that are on your minds as listeners as we've gone through some of the discussions. I've seen quite a lot of chatter going on the chat. Sorry, I can't keep up with the chat and moderate at the same time. We might have a couple of minutes for questions in a second. But right now I'm gonna thank the panel again. A pleasure to talk with you all today. Appreciate you being available at such remote times and remote locations for some of you. And I'm gonna hand back to Gary, I believe, to think about wrapping up.
Wow, thank you very much, David. I'd like to call on Andrea from IBM just to make some closing remarks, after which I've just got a couple of announcements that I'd like to close off with. Andrea, over to you.
Thank you so much, Gary, and I'm glad to be on this webinar today. Thanks for having me. So it was a very, very interesting session. We had some interesting discussions, and we learned that different business models have different challenges during this time of COVID-19, Black Lives Matter movement, Brexit. So there's so many things going on right now, and I think it's so important to have these sessions. And Farida mentioned IBM, and I think it's a great point about inclusion. And as Reshma mentioned as well, it's not just about from the diverse business side, but it's for sure from the corporate. So we also have to make sure that we are training our internal people, so our procurement people, what is supplier diversity? It's not just a box ticking thing. And keeping in mind, so you don't know what you don't know. You don't know the suppliers you don't know, so give them a chance. And it's all about corporates opening doors, and it's all about inclusion. So IBM is one of the leaders of supplier diversity. We have many actions ongoing, as you can imagine, as probably many other corporates, around BAME, around Black Lives Matters, and also around COVID-19. One of the things I wanted to highlight and mention is that IBM will be hosting a business resiliency session for small and medium-sized businesses for free on July 21st. I have shared the invitation with Mayank, and if you want to know more about that, you can reach out to me as well. It will be available for free also as replay afterwards on the IBM website. So in summary, IBM is one of the founding members of GSDA. We are so very happy with the progress that was made with the GSDA growth, and we all know its purpose is important than ever. And I always mention collaboration is key in this area. So together we are so much stronger, and this means collaboration and buying from each other, not just corporates from diverse-owned businesses, but also within the networks, like Farida mentioned. So I think this is really great what you do there, and a great role model on that. So leading me to the end of this session today, I would like to thank the incredible panelists for their candid reflections, and to everyone who joined us today. Thank you, David, for expertly guiding through the conversations, and I hope you all, like me, gained a great deal of insights from the sessions. So now I would like to hand over to Gary, who will provide some more information about the next GSDA events and webcasts. Thank you again, everybody, for joining, and stay safe. Gary, handing over back to you.
Thank you, Andrea. It's not very often that I get to have the last word. But I'm sure all of us have after what we've heard and what has been shared with us, it's been very fruitful 1.5 hours that we've spent. Before we close off, I'd just like to remind everybody of our upcoming third webcast, which will be taking place on the 15th of July. As you can see on the screen, the starting times, if you haven't registered for it as of yet, please make sure that you register for it. This time round, we will be talking from a council perspective. So the panelists for that session would be myself and my colleagues, Laura, Cassandra, and Mayank. And we'll once again be having David navigate us through the session, asking the tough questions to which we would have to provide responses. It's really going to be an excellent session, and we encourage everybody to register and join us on the 15th again. Then if you can move on to the next slide, I'd just like everybody to put a placeholder into their calendars. Everything going virtual. We will be having a GSDA Virtual Global Supplier Diversity Conference and Trade Show on the 14th of October. We are in the process of formulating the overall agenda and the program of events, and it will be a platform whereby we'll be having much more dialogue around the issues of supply diversity. We will also be sharing experiences, but very importantly is the opportunity for everyone to network amongst each other and through the platform that we'd be creating. So please watch this space. Make sure that you visit our GSDA website, and if you are not already on our mailing list, please subscribe to our mailing list so that as the information becomes available and we release it via our mailing list, that you will be receiving it and not miss out on this opportunity. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us. The difficult thing of saying hello is the time frames that we find ourselves in. So I had to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. The easy part of saying, of ending off is that I only need to say goodbye. Thank you, everyone, and good night, good afternoon, and good morning.
Thank you. Bye-bye.